Just call me Nostradamus. I made this tweet prior to the race on Friday, and I absolutely nailed it. Also, I got a few other predictions right for the Australian GP, but there's so much to talk about. I think maybe a separate recap video for the predictions is in order. We just have so much to talk about, and we'll see how this one goes. If I find that there's enough time to sneak in a prediction recap, I will. If I feel that it's getting too lengthy, I'll do a whole separate video on the prediction recap. Um, Another thing to talk about today, though, is the voodoo wheel strikes again and is now 2-0 thus far in the casting mystic spells of unfortunate drivers whom it lands on. We'll talk more about that later, of course, but let's recap the Australian Grand Prix. Hey yo, Chris here, and thanks for tuning into the Delta. Like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. It helps out the channel a lot for the cost of nothing but a few clicks. Well, what do we think about the Australian Grand Prix? It was definitely interesting. On one hand, we saw something we haven't seen in a while. Verstappen DNFing, which ended his 43 race finishing streak, as well as ending his 9 race winning streak. So we saw a new winner. Kinda. Seems like every time Verstappen ain't winning, it's my guy, Carlos Sainz. However, on the other hand, did we get a fun and exciting race? Let's talk about it. Alrighty, I feel we should start with Carlos Sainz because we usually always start with the winner, and when Verstappen wins, we start with him. It's usually not as surprising, but Sainz won, so we'll talk about the winner off the bat. The first thing that I will say is I think we missed out on a fun Verstappen-Sainz battle. I say this because for the first time in a long time, I felt Ferrari showed up ready to go for the weekend. Sainz was absolutely flawless this weekend, and the strategy as well was flawless. That is just so rare for a Ferrari team to be both doing so well. Usually it's Leclerc doing amazing and they screw him over somehow. Or the strategy was good and then Leclerc or Sainz wreck it into the wall. So I felt that the Ferrari were ready to go. I can't definitively say Sainz would have beat Verstappen 1v1 in the full length of the race, but it at least felt like he would have given him a run for his money. With those 4 DRS zones, I think that really matters on that track. And given what we know thus far about the Ferrari car, they would have had the advantage going to Sainz because Verstappen just would never have been able to get that 3-second lead, 5-second lead, 5 laps in to 7-second lead, 20 laps in, he's 20 seconds ahead. I think those 4 DRS zones would have really helped Sainz out, just keeping that gap close, just the way that he was racing all weekend. However, we will never know, because in lap 4, Verstappen had his rear right brakes decide to explode on him. It all started when Sainz seemingly passed Verstappen with ease, and originally, when I saw that, I thought, oh, he's just going to let him do that with these DRS zones so consecutive. Verstappen will just let Sainz go right by him and then return the favor later down the track. It just seems so easy for Sainz, but I can't lie. Like 10% of my brain was also like, the Ferrari car is just better and Sainz is the next Verstappen. But then that was it. Verstappen was out of the race for the first time in 2 years since a previous Australian GP. So Sainz was just zooming, and then Verstappen's car just went up in smoke. But that leads me to like the overall notion of the topic of this race. Was this a good race? Was it fun? Was it exciting? For me, it was absolutely amazing. I loved it. But I'm a Ferrari fan, and Carlos Sainz is my favorite driver. I loved every single moment. My only complaint was that I was worried the race was going to last too long, and there was too much time for Ferrari to mess it up in good old-fashioned Ferrari ways. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and I got to enjoy a Charles Leclerc second-place finish as well. But for everyone else, was the almighty Verstappen falling out of the race exciting enough to call the race good? Because once Verstappen left, we were left with then the next good driver in the next good car just to go for a Sunday drive. I don't feel like Sainz was ever in real danger of losing his position. There were moments where I was like, oh, I mean, Leclerc's catching up and Lando's catching the Leclerc. Next thing you know, we might have a battle, but that was very short-lived, and then Sainz went back to his multi-second lead. Yeah, we got Lewis Hamilton getting that engine failure, and then obviously George Russell's big crash there on the final lap. But other than that, it was just driving. Maybe I was too elated over the Sainz leading the race thing, and I wasn't paying much attention to everyone else. But I did watch the highlights and the recap of the race there, and even that was essentially what I just explained. The race starts, Sainz is booking it, Verstappen goes down, Hamilton DNFs, then there's just driving around for a little bit, and then at the very last lap, we had a big crash. So just let me know in the comments, did you enjoy the race? Like, as a regular or as a casual F1 fan, if you're a fan of like McLaren or Aston Martin or any of the other teams, what did you think of the race? Because again, like with my Ferrari filter, it's really, really easy for me to say that was amazing, but when I do just look back at the replays and the race overall, it was just a little him-haw there. We had a few exciting moments, but I wouldn't say it was exciting. So I guess I just want to know if like we or me are just being too picky. Is it too much to ask for a diverse podium every race, and action and incidents every time these drivers speed around a track 50 plus times? I think if you're a fan of a particular team or an individual driver, maybe just having like that one chance a few times a year there, that would be good enough. Like if I had this experience 3, 4, 5 times a year as a Ferrari fan, that one of the drivers just show up, I could say, wow, this is extremely fun. But at the same time, if they're not going to do that, if it's just going to be constantly like one driver over and over and over again, like, are we going to need to have like the yellow flags and the red flags and the rain and like action in the midfield to make these races interesting? Because again, like if you're not a Sainz fan or you're not a Ferrari fan, I mean, I know if you're a Verstappen fan, you didn't have a good race, but like, or a Mercedes fan, but like, again, if you're just watching the race and don't know anything about it, like, was that entertaining for you? But as we're talking about the midfield, let's talk about what really, really grinds my gears. I said there in the predictions video, the biggest losers would be Kick Sauber. And they pretty much delivered with their atrocious pit stops again. But to me, the real big loser was that James Vowles, the team manager of Williams. And before you start tapping in the comments, it's for the team and you always play your best driver and blah, 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 blah. Like, I just don't want to really hear that. This isn't about Albon and how much at fault he is, and it's definitely not Logan Sargeant's fault at all. It lies 100% on James Vowles. For one, for risking not bringing spare parts. Again, there are people go, well, the money and the cap and the parts limits. That's James Vowles' job. His job as team manager is to ensure that they have all this stuff figured out prior to race weekend, prior to season. Like, I would hope that if you're a team manager, you're just not sitting there all off season going, Bahrain, 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 Bahrain. Like, you got to be like, what are we doing at Bahrain? And the following week we're going to Jeddah, and then in 2 weeks we're going to Australia, and then 2 weeks we're going to Japan. Do we have a contingency plan for when excuse my friend, shit hits the fan? I didn't see that. That's his job. He says it was a difficult decision to make, but what he really did in a difficult decision was he just made the safe and easiest decision of the possibilities. The hard decision, and the correct one, should have been telling your better driver that he had messed up and he will now bear the consequences of his actions and will miss the race, while giving Logan Sargeant the opportunity to prove himself. He not only robbed Sargeant of the race, but he like literally robbed him of an opportunity to prove that he belongs in Formula One. And you could say, well, Sargeant sucks and we know the outcome. It would have been bad. He would have finished P16 and blah, blah, blah. I say, do you know that? Do you really, really know that? Because Alex Albon finished 11th out of the points with three race car drivers that typically score points not finishing. So in theory, Albon placed 14th. He had 3 places spotted him towards him and couldn't get it done. When chaos hits the track, you end up with a Sainz victory. When both Mercedes goes down, you get both Haas drivers getting points. When Fernando Alonso gets a 20-second penalty, you get a Tsunoda placing 7th and earning RB 6 points. What did your better driver with your better plan get you? It got you nada. It got you nix. It got you nil. It got you nothing. And they deserved every bit of that. And why is that? Because the general consensus I saw via the Twitterverse and some other, outlets there on the social media is that people did not favor that decision. And it's most likely because we could all kind of relate to Logan Sargent's situation, where like we've all been in a situation where we work hard and we try our best, and we may not be the best, but we know when like opportunity comes a knocking, like we're ready and it's our turn. But then for some reason, we get like the rug swept beneath us and not even get a chance to do it. I think a lot of people have done, whether it's been at work or at school or when you played your own sports, like there's all kinds of stuff that go on in life that you think it's my time. And then someone that has more importance than you, let's say, says, nah, actually, you're not gonna do that. I know that so-and-so messed up, but we're just going to give them another opportunity. I get it. It's Formula One. It's the best. It's the elite of the best. It's the pros. But I just truly believe people prefer to stand on principle more than what the numbers say. I kind of have a little bit more feeling towards that. I was in the U.S. Army, and now I work in the construction field. And I can just promise you that, like, in those fields, we rely on the principles and character of somebody or something far more than how fast you can run, how strong you are, how much you can shovel, or how much you can shoot. We would much rather have the right thing be done than what, oh, well, he can run really, really fast, or he can drive really, really fast. Yeah, but he also messed up. A good leader, in my opinion, he believes in his guys, especially when you have somebody like James Vowles say, I believe in Sargent, he's making strides and blah, blah, blah. But you didn't show that there. If you believe that he was actually going to be good, and when your all-star goes down, and in this case, wrecks his car, you're supposed to go to the next man, which is Sargent, and encourage him. You don't push him down. You don't pull him down. You don't tell him he's the one that's going to have to bear the punishment for the poor performance of not only the other guy, but the poor leadership that you've done by putting your team in this situation. I got that off my chest, so we'll move on. It is what it is. But let's discuss like the other bigger stories. We have both Mercedes retire from the race. Hamilton lost his engine there in lap 17, and Russell wrecked on the last lap, going for a hard push to advance one more spot against Alonso. Now, I will say that neither of the drivers are at fault. Hamilton can't do anything about his car just taking a dump in the bed, and Russell certainly can't do anything about Alonso slowing down on that corner. Hence why Alonso got that 20-second penalty. Quickly on that, I love me some Fernando Alonso. I just don't think that was cool, and quite honestly, that could have been much, much more dangerous and catastrophic than it actually was. I don't know the specific science behind it, but from what I was reading and what some more race-savvy individuals were saying, it has something to do with the way that he created dirty air for Russell, decreasing his downforce, and it made it extremely difficult for then Russell to control his car at that turn. And at those speeds that Russell was going, the fact that he just didn't rear end Alonso there and was able to avoid like a bigger accident was actually more amazing than anything. But nonetheless, it forced George Russell to make that quick reaction, lost his car because he had no downforce, and ends up in the wall. However, this doesn't change the fact that Mercedes missed out on points. And if I were a Mercedes fan, I'd be getting not only frustrated, but worried that this team is just not going to be competitive in any real way this season and possibly going into next season. As for some fun little notes about the race, we'll just start with the Voodoo Wheel. It struck again. Last week, we spun it, and it landed right there on the podium plunge. And what the podium plunge means, that the drivers who placed on podium in the previous race were or are going to be at risk of the mysticism of the Voodoo Wheel. It was Leclerc, Perez, and Verstappen on the podium there in Saudi Arabia. And Leclerc avoided the wheel's voodoo somehow, but he still did struggle, particularly there in qualifying. And I was thinking, oh gosh, this is how it starts. And then the race came, and Leclerc still struggled a bit during the race. However, being in a Ferrari and being the good driver that he is, he was able to hold down second place, and crisis was averted. But there's still something up between the Ferrari car and Leclerc, the driver. It's not meshing completely. If they figure it out, Ferrari's going to be one heck of a 1-2 combination there. And I think they're going to get a lot of points like that. But until that happens, I think Leclerc's going to continue to struggle. They really have to figure out a way to fine-tune that car for him. Then on the other hand, we have Perez, who received a grid penalty there in quali, which took him off the second row and put him back a few spots there in sixth place, where he had to fight for spots. And then I'm assuming then Red Bull had to change their strategy up, right? Like, thinking that they're in third place, they're sitting here saying, Verstappen goes heavy off the line, Sainz goes heavy off the line, Perez goes heavy off the line. Perez makes a move on Sainz, slows Sainz down, Verstappen rides off into the sunset for another victory. But now that he's back, he has to fight for those spots, and now Verstappen's on his own in a 1v1 battle, and then obviously his stuff broke down. But nonetheless, Checo then finished in fifth, which is not the worst race of all time, but definitely not as good as what it could have been. Was it the Voodoo Wheel that also struck to Perez? I might say so. And then there was Verstappen, and the Voodoo Wheel ate him for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, chewed him up, spit him out, and stepped on him. Like, what a crazy event to have your brakes just explode like that. Like, that shot we got of him coming into the pit lane, and it just went poof, right off to the side. I couldn't believe it. Verstappen, he had a great quali, and I just truly believe we're par for course. Like, Sainz, here he is, giving me hope. Verstappen comes in, he crushes it, and then he cruises to a flawless victory the next day. But no. That Voodoo Wheel had other plans and blessed us with something we never saw coming. And the reason I say that is just like, cars are just so reliable anymore. I feel at this point, if a car is going to retire, it's going to be because of a driver error, not because of a mechanical issue. Like, they're going to crash it into a wall or spin it off and get beached or something like that. But this time, as fate would have it, it was a mechanical issue, and we were blessed with a Verstappen-less race. I'm telling you, if the Voodoo Wheel keeps this up, we may be getting an exciting incident every single race. But anyway, that's it, really. Like I said, I feel that the race might not have been the most exciting for the typical fan, or not the Ferrari fan. Obviously not a good race for Mercedes and Red Bull. If you take a look here at the standings, you know, you have Carlos Sainz, who came in first, Charles second, and we can talk about the McLarens if you want. McLaren did a pretty good job. Norris believes that they had the pace to catch Charles Leclerc, but their strategy just kind of didn't mesh well enough, and they got undercut, and then they were chasing. They just never had it. I kind of saw it, but again, I feel like it's more that Charles Leclerc and the car aren't working well, more than like McLaren is better than the Ferrari. I don't want to get it mixed up that I think McLaren now suddenly can compete with Ferrari. I just think there's a more significant issue there with Charles Leclerc's car than Ferrari's letting off. Who knows when or how they'll get that fixed. But if they don't get it fixed, Lando Norris is correct. That car will catch that Ferrari. Being an Australian race, I'm sure a lot of people were unhappy that Oscar Piastri gave up third place for Lando, but you could just see that Piastri just wasn't keeping pace. And then you had Sergio Perez barreling down, and at the time of the race, it wasn't as close, or it was more close than what it was like the finish of the race came out to be. So it was probably the better decision to get a 3-4 finish with Norris Piastri than possibly like Norris getting passed and then he's finishing 5th, and then Oscar Piastri gets passed and then they finish 4-5, or even worse, 4-6 or 5-7. So it might have been the better strategy of the two. I think Oscar Piastri has a lot of promise. So that was really, really cool and exciting. Then you have, obviously, like I said, Sergio Perez came in 5th. Lance Stroll managed to land a 6th place spot. I believe that's because of Fernando Alonso's 22nd penalty, though. And then, obviously, because of that penalty, Yuki Tsunoda got into 7th place instead of 8th, and that's where Fernando Alonso ended up. Haas, I predicted it. Shocker pick. Haas scores double points. Why? Well, I said it was going to take some major players to DNF, and that's what we got. We had Verstappen DNF, and then both Mercedes DNF, and I'm sitting there watching Nico Hulkenberg in the points. I'm going, oh, darn. Where, the shocker pick just missed, and then sure enough, George Russell wrecks. Kevin Magnussen takes 10th. Looking onto the constructor standings, because of that DNF by Max Verstappen, the gap got really, really tight. And that's what I'm saying. Like, is it now more exciting now? Because Ferrari is only 4 points off of Red Bull. Because, I mean, Carlos Sainz missed the race last week. Now, we don't know if he would have finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 10th, or DNF'd himself. But he didn't gain any points. And Oliver Behrman scored the points. I think, 6 points. Also, he finished in 7th, which is 6 points. So they got some. But imagine if Sainz was in the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Maybe he finishes, right behind Charles and gets more points, So maybe we do have at least a little bit more contention up top. I don't want to get too excited. We all seen what Red Bull and Max Verstappen can do. But given what these numbers are saying here, we might have a bit more excitement there in Japan. And if Ferrari can close the gap, or Sergio Perez DNFs next time, or, God forbid, Charles Leclerc DNFs or something like that, then we'll be talking about other things. But we can have something happening here. And McLaren, they're 40 points down. So, if they can continue to have a good race and Ferrari or Red Bull or both have some misfortune, that gap can get tightened up. And then you start getting to the Mercedes and Aston Martin, where we kind of know what they are. And then you got the midfield fighting. Looking at the driver standings, you have Max Verstappen with 51 and Charles Leclerc with 47. That's significant now, because now it doesn't seem like there's this uphill battle where Max Verstappen is 60, 70, 80 points ahead, something stupid, where you're like, well, Max Verstappen now has to DNF 5 races for Charles Leclerc to even get close, assuming if he could win a race. With the 47 points there by Charles, Charles doesn't have to win every race, but just be competitive. And if Max Verstappen can have a couple hiccups like he did there at Australia, and Charles Leclerc get a victory, or Carlos Sainz gets a victory, that might be a long-lasting competition throughout the season. Again, I think Max Verstappen's just going to come out on top because, again, we know who he is. But at least we're not going to get to race 8 and be like, well, this season's over. Or now race 12, well, this season's definitely over. And then race 16 is like, why are we even doing the last eight races, right? So that's fun. I'm excited to see where this all comes down. Japan has now become significantly more exciting because of the Titan gaps, both in the Constructors and Drivers' Cup or Championship. Finish up there, we have then Nico Hulkenberg, who got 3, and Kevin Magnussen that got 1. Yuki Tsunoda got 6. If you take again look at the championship, because of that penalty by Fernando Alonso, that actually bumps Haas to 7th place and RB to 6th. So Haas will be removed from the voodoo wheel next predictions, and RB will replace them. Anyway, that is the Australian Grand Prix recap. Again, I'm very indifferent to sit here and say this was the most exciting experience ever. So glad it happened, because it wasn't very much different outside of the top driver just getting bumped out and another very, very good driver and another very, very good car going for a Sunday drive. But it was still fun to see a different winner. It was still fun to see Ferrari finish 1-2 and have a good weekend from start to finish. Yeah, there were some hiccups, but the end result was a 1-2 finish, and that is the maximum amount of points. Charles Leclerc even got the fastest lap. So, like, they just couldn't have acquired any more points than what they could have, despite what happened with Charles Leclerc's car there in quali. If you enjoyed the content, again, like and subscribe to the channel. And if you would also not mind, head over to my Twitter. I post little things here and there. Sometimes a Nostradamus pick, like Carlos Sainz with an epic comeback, wins the Australian GP, and then he actually does it. And then I also have my Twitch link in the description, where it's been Thursdays, but it might bump over to Fridays. Who knows how the schedule really works out. I try to find time that doesn't impede with the race schedule and my personal schedule, but I play F1 Manager, sometimes Formula 123 until the new game comes out, but usually F1 Manager at the race location of that week. So the next time we play will be there in Japan, and with the night schedule, it might end up being while there's practice going on. So I can have practice on one screen and race with the other, and we can talk about the real practice while I do fake practice on a computer game. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Chris, and you've tuned into the Delta. Take care, stay safe, and have fun out there. Until next time, bye everybody.